doing another follow along case study with y'all today. I'm going to do this one a little bit different from yesterday's because I am going to upload the actual case study document so you can be able to go through and read, because as you can see, it's a little bit lengthy. It does go into a lot more detail than what I'm going to go through in the follow along. And more specifically, it has towards the bottom here some actual data to go over. So we're going to reference the data in the questions, but I don't actually have it set in the PowerPoint itself. Okay, so you're going to want to go through these kind of simultaneously as you're going through the video, and have these kind of as we go alongside it. Also, we're not going to answer all of the questions in the actual case study. It's only going to be the ones that are embedded in the video, so you don't have to kind of, pre-plan form or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to hop on over here and start the actual follow along. Okay, so we're going to be looking at exaggerated traits and breeding success in widow birds. And so I found this case study to be very, very interesting because we're still talking about ecology and animal behaviors, and all of this kind of ties back to evolution and natural selection. All right, so in part one, in the introduction, there's some key points there before they actually jump into the actual case study, and it just kind of recaps what is natural selection. So remember, natural selection is going to be those inherited traits that are passed on to the offspring, okay? And so these traits are going to be influenced based off of the environment, and so these can be either abiotic or biotic factors that are going to influence the continuation of those traits. So in part one, in the introduction, it actually goes over the actual study species, gives you some background information about them. Okay, so, and I put a little picture as well, so this way we could be able to see what these guys look like. All right, so those widow birds, they're small finch-like birds. And so one thing about them is that they do experience sexual dimorphism. And so we actually had this a while back in a couple of case studies when we were in school. Remember, the sexual dimorphism is that the sexes are going to not resemble each other when it comes to breeding time. Okay, so what that means is during non-breeding season, as we have here, both sexes are going to resemble similar brownish coloration. Okay, and so they're going to be looking similar in nature. But when breeding season comes along, the males actually are going to change their appearance quite a bit. Okay, so they're going to produce black feathers. Depending on the species of these widow birds, some have red or yellow patterns right in this chest area, right over here. And then they can also have like a chevron print down the wings as well. And some species actually have elongated tails, very elongated, as you can see here in the picture. And so during the breeding season, the main thing here is males utilize their coloration in order to secure and defend territory to build a nest. Okay, so they're then, once they find their nest, they're going to perform these ritual dances to eventually attract the females. So when we're talking about natural selection in part one here, we're going to focus on sexual selection when it comes to organisms differentiating amongst each other to be able to find mates and choose the best mate for them. So there's two different types of selection. There's intrasexual selection and there's intersexual selection. All right, the first one, we're looking at members of one sex is going to compete with one another for the opportunity to actually mate. Okay, so I'm going to click back really quick. So males securing and defending territory to build a nest, that would be an example of my intrasexual selection. Okay, so it's not necessarily male and female at that point. It's actually just them being able to compete in order to find a mate to begin with. Intersexual selection is going to be the female's choice. And what we mean by that is this is where the females are going to be looking at the quality of the male's genes in order to select their mate. Okay, so it's not, they're going to be looking at who has the better nest. It could be the coloration of their chest, it could be the elongation of their tail. So intersexual selection is that female's choice. So what I want you to do is, based off of this, I want you to form a hypothesis for intrasexual selection for these widow birds. Okay, so what do you think that will look like? So again, you are going to want to read through the actual case study. In part 1, this is just a little, rough sketch of what it was talking about. So do make sure that you are referring to the case study. And when you're formulating your hypothesis, make sure that you're focusing on the male's appearance, because that's what the case study's looking at throughout its entirety. All right, now that you have formed a hypothesis for intrasexual selection, I want you to form a hypothesis for intersexual selection for these widow birds. So again, you're going to be focusing on the male's appearance, but remember what intersexual selection is referring to. So now we're looking at those females and finding mates. Okay, so now that you have formed 2 hypotheses based on the different types of selection, I want you to explain your reasoning behind your hypothesis. So think about why you've come up with this hypothesis. So what you should have come across is pretty much a double-edged sword here. And what I mean by that is, remember the males, instead of them being brown or like a tannish color, blending into their environments, when it comes to breeding season, these males are actually going to have a negative impact on their survival during mating season because of the color that they turn. Okay, so they're going to have bright red, bright yellow, black, and as you can just see in the picture here, this bird stands out quite a bit in its environment. So if they do survive, it makes them better mates for females to choose from, because clearly they have better survival skills to be able to survive from predation. Okay, so now moving on to part 2, we're actually looking at some truth in advertising when it comes to these birds. So the first question that it asks in this small little section in the case study are, what are some of the possible signals for male quality in long-tailed widow birds, and what information might they convey? Okay, so think about what does this different coloration mean for these males when it comes to mating. So what you should have come across is bright coloration or longer tails could indicate better health or, their vitality as a male species. Okay, so that's kind of some of the possible signals that you should have come across and answered here. All right, we're skipping number 4. We're going to go to number 5. So while the signals given by males can indicate their quality, so having the brighter chest, the longer tails, could this also be detrimental for the males, and how is that possible? So what you should have come across is possibly having those brighter plumage or longer tails could indicate better health, which we've kind of come across as a good thing. But again, those traits can also increase their risk of mortality from predation. So they're also having a harder time trying to survive because they are easily spotted now. So we're going to go on to part 3 in the case study. So again, there's a lot more information in part 3 than what I'm covering right here. So do make sure that you are referring to the case study and reading through it, and just kind of using this as a follow along to help you answer the questions. So it goes over what they call a handicap hypothesis. So in terms of what we've been discussing, this is going to propose that females can assess the quality of a male based on their ability to survive despite those bright colors. Okay, so what does that actually mean? So we focused, or not we, but they focused on this study in 3 different segments, in 3 different studies. Okay, so the epaulette coloration study is the redder the epaulette, which is pretty much the chest, equal having some sort of nesting territory. So the redder they were, the more likely they were going to have some sort of territory of their own. So again, make sure you read over the case study. But number 6 kind of did this a little bit different. Is this study going to be considered intrasexual or intersexual selection? Okay, so it's just a 50-50 chance here. The next study was tail length. So what they did here was they compared the number of active nests, or the date, and the date of the first egg among males of different tail lengths. Okay, so they're looking to see if tail lengths had any indication of how many active nests, or if they were going to have any eggs sooner. So, what is the hypothesis being tested in this study? So I want you to formulate a hypothesis of what's going on here. So you should have come up with something along the lines is if tail length is important to females, males with longer tails will have more nests and will produce eggs sooner in those nests. Okay, so something along those lines. They also did tail length manipulation. So they compared the number of active nests among males of similar tail lengths. Okay, and so there is the graph to go off of for this one. And so, how do you interpret the results of this experiment in terms of sexual selection? So you would want to refer to the figures that is provided there for you. And what you would have concluded is that females prefer longer tails. So, like I said, there's a lot of graphs with information there. And so make sure that you go through it. You do not have to go and answer the questions that are in the case study. You have already answered the ones that I wanted you to focus on here in this ed puzzle. Okay, so do not worry about going in and completing any more questions in that case study. You're only responsible for the ones that we are doing right here, right now. And since I did shorten it, I did add some multiple choice questions here at the end for you to answer. All right, so the first question is which of the following is an example of intrasexual selection? All right, you remember what intrasexual selection means. So would it be A, females choosing mates with brighter coloration, B, females choosing mates with darker coloration, C, males securing territories based upon epilet brightness, or males using courtship displays? The next question is which of the following would be an example of directional selection in male widow birds? Would it be A, males with intermediate tail lengths mating more frequently, B, males with very long or very short tails mating more frequently, or C, tail lengths becoming longer in a population over time? Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this follow along. Like I said, it's a little bit different from the one that we did yesterday. You do want to refer to the case study PDF that is attached to it. But again, you are not responsible for any more questions aside from the ones that are assigned here in this ed puzzle. Hopefully y'all enjoy y'all's weekend, and we'll be back at it again on Monday.